Sim Racing 2024 is a wrap, and it was the biggest we've had so far. Unfortunately, I didn't have the most amount of time possible because of the Americans and the Canadian. Talking about these guys, we can really see the growth of Sim Racing Expo, and we can see more and more exhibitors coming in and more people also coming in through the door. Right, the big event about this expo was definitely the unveiling of Assetto Corsa Evo. It was present in many booths, and it was even possible to try it in a motion rig. The handling was fantastic, the graphics were superb, and it had a little bit of a few early alpha niggles, but there's a lot of potential there. Don't get really hyped about it though, because there's a lot of scope in this game, and it's easy to kunos to get lost and then deliver something that is really not that good. I am actually hopeful about this, but cautious as well. I have a couple of videos about it if you want to check it out. Thrustmaster was a surprise in this expo. They brought down the T598. It's a PlayStation compatible entry-level direct drive that has a sensible price. I was invited to try it in Gran Turismo and Assetto Corsa Competizione, but I can't really say that I'm impressed with it, even in its power class, and it's around 5 Newton meters. It always felt that didn't really have the best force feedback and felt a little bit rubbery, and in Assetto Corsa it didn't really feel that was any detail there at all. Unfortunately, because this is an expo setting and I didn't have much time and they wouldn't allow me, I couldn't change any settings to see if there was something there. The bundled pedals were actually pretty decent though, so there's something there. Hopefully with some settings tuning will be better, but once again, I didn't have the possibility to do that. As for Logitech, they brought a big booth with 3 different areas with playset rigs. It was full of their new equipment like the hub and all of that. There was a really interesting build in an area as well with that was mimicking a living room. Because they had the most varied, or actually the most number of rigs there was always a bunch of people trying their stuff up, which is pretty good. They even had Assetto Corsa Evo running in their rig. But they had something really unique. At the back of their stand, there was somebody from Momo hand assembling or hand stitching some wheels as well, so you get to see how they are actually built. Okay, now for Fanatec. After a terrible 2024 with lots of downs and even further downs, I wasn't sure what I was expecting from them. They came back with some interesting things, but I think the air was still a bit heavy and everyone visiting was a really bit defensive. But the team, I think, did a really good job showing their new stuff, like the Corsair rig that is in reality quite interesting, with some streaming in mind as well. They also had a couple of new wheels, mainly the Porsche Vision CSL Elite, and also the Bentley wheel was released. The CSL Vision is actually pretty well construction for a CSL Elite or CSL line. Lots of buttons there, and the Bentley wheel was released once again, and it cost like $2,000. But I kind of wonder what would happen if you fuse them together. Anyways, they also have the replacement of their handbrake, the Club Sport. Finally, we're going to get the Club Sport V2 because the Club Sport V1 was a bit of a tragedy in my eyes, and it will be load cell, and the internals will be in a separate place with a decent plug this time. They will release also soon-ish a new version of the software that has Fanalabs integrated. Also, I have tried Conspit for the first time as well. They had the new wheelbase, the Aris, a wheel, and the pedals in their own cockpit. The cockpit was okay. I think there are much better cockpits out there. They do their own thing. But the stars were definitely the wheelbase and the pedals. The wheelbases are really generally very hard to test properly without ample time, but the Aries was pretty good after taking about 2 minutes to remove filtering. Fortunately, I had somebody with Conspit that was helping me out with that. It felt snappy and responsive, and the wheel GP290 had a rather unique 3D shape. Though I was impressed more about the CPP pedals. They were hydraulic, they felt really good on brake, and they were trying to replicate the Aston GT3 car, their sponsor, well, within the realms of sim racing at least. I might have a few review units in the future. SimiCube had a huge stand at the middle. I couldn't get there, I couldn't find a place to sit because it always had 5 or 10 people waiting in line for just one sim rig alone, so the reception to their stuff or their new stuff is pretty good. As for wheels, I think we have such a good offering being shown that I'm bound to forget someone. Assetto released a new wheel, the Invicta. I didn't have time to test it at all, but from what I've seen, it looks great. It even has an internal gyro, so when you rotate, it actually turns the wheel around. Delta SimTech had a booth with their products, even some of the new ones like the hub and the screenless version of the Evo we've reviewed in the past. You go give these guys a look because they have really high quality stuff. Their wheels are incredibly well constructed and feel really solid. Bavarian came with the Alpha and Omega on their boots. Soon enough, they will also have a new software out for them. The wheels are extremely high quality, and I have an Alpha for review. It will be out soonish. The reception to these wheels have been fantastic, and they always had the line to try it out. They add a bunch of wheels around so you can play around with them to have a look and whatnot. So good reception to them, and also good reception to GSI. They came back from 2022. Their stand standed out a bit because of how simple it was. While everybody had everything so well developed, GSI opted for simplicity. They have had all the new equipment like the FPA V2, the Upper V1. You know, it's really great quality stuff. I wish I had time to test it, but I was able to pick the stuff up with the new wheels, and you can really see their quality. It's the same deal with Soulpack. They have really interesting wheels. One of them has a huge screen, but at the time I wasn't really available to test it. What I found about the screen one is that it is super light, but while we're talking about light, I had time to test the SimRep version of a Cosworth LMP3 wheel that they had in their simulator. Their wheel won't be on everybody's alley because it's 4 to 5 digits depending on configuration. It's basically a top-end replica for top-end racers that want to do sim racing with an almost one-to-one replication, including the electronics and more arcane things like connectors. Each one of them is like a mil spec and costs like 170 euro. The wheel was weird, but in a good way. It felt like it didn't exist at all. It had minimal impact on a force feedback. I've never seen something like this. I love their rig. Of course, I will won't be able ever to buy something like this, so it was good to try it out. Speaking of rigs, there were a few around, but it wasn't like last year. Sabelt was there with a new color for their lineup of sim rigs. It's super sturdy equipment, and now they have a black version of their sim rig. I still prefer the gray one because it looks a little more like my car. One thing that they brought was a chemical activated seat molding pad of sorts, the same thing they use in real cars in order to mold a seat to your body. So this is really interesting. Rails, I don't think it were a really big thing this year, but there was something really interesting that probably everybody missed, or most people missed. 3D Wrap brought an accessibility sim. Sim racing is really for everyone, and having a company creating solutions based on accessibility is something to behold. And with their sim, if you are a wheelchair user, you'll be able to use a sim rig with the steering wheel. Really great stuff, 3D Wrap. Outside of standing rigs into movement rigs, there were quite a few this year as well. There was one that was basically a 5-axis of sort that was going around. I didn't have time to record it, but it was pretty fun, I've heard. And ImSim for movement rigs, they brought a few of them, including their new Gara, the one that looks like a racing car. The setup on the Gara was mentally responsive. ImSim really knows how to set up their stuff. They were even able to get AC Evo running in one of their sims. And now towards another one that I thought also interesting was Novus. They brought a movement rig that is built of somewhat of a solid aluminum monocoque of sorts, where they add their own made actuator system where everything is basically done in Europe. It's incredibly sturdy. Though I have to say that the movement wasn't well tuned. In my opinion, it was a bit of too much movement, but it is undeniable that the quality is there. As one last point is race room, because they had drift content. You never really see much drift in sim racing expos, and they brought drift content. I've tried it out and it was really, really good. I believe the content will launch somewhere in next year. There were plenty of other really good boots that I didn't have time to record. For example, Sim Racing Pros, they do excellent pedals. They had a couple of regular rigs there, but they also had a 206 WRC movement rig. And that was something really cool. You could go inside of it, and basically it was an enclosed system with movement rig, and you can basically build your own with a chassis of a car, which is pretty cool. Also, Pagani had a Pagani car, which they turned on every so often, and also a Pagani rig. If you were able to buy a car, you could also buy a rig. So there was still a bit of craziness all around. As a last point, SimMagic also presented an active pedal, but there was really no way to try it. Shoutouts to Lawrence, bringing his Potato Nation with him. Sadly, I couldn't do the alarm for this year. Maybe another time I'll do it for him. The Potato Nation is sponsoring a few young real-world racing drivers and even bringing out a kids sim racing book to get some funds for them. So these puds are incredibly awesome. A little bit of a debrief about the expo itself. The expo was probably the most professional one that we've had so far. Everything was more or less smooth all the way. It was well organized, it was decently sized, and pretty much everything was filled up with exhibitors from left to right, from start to finish. There was actually pretty good density. The location was great. Getting there was pretty simple. It was easy to get a bite if you want to, or go to the toilets. It didn't feel very confusing. Everything felt that was really well organized, and basically I just have to congratulate the team behind Sim Racing Expo 2024 for a great expo. A big thank you to every supporter, member, or Twitch subscriber, and also subscribers from YouTube for the help you've done this year. If you really want to help the channel, the best way to do so is press like, subscribe, and also why not become a member so you'll be part of the credits.